In this tech-driven world we live in, as citizens, we all expect fast, seamless, and just amazing digital services experience from the government. We expect that from our services. Of course, expect that from government as well. And this is what Salesforce and Drupal can do for elevate the citizen experiences. And we're here to talk about that with these two legends. Can I get you guys to introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, so I'm Robin Leonard, partner at Xenai Digital. I've been working with Pauline for
Too
13,
long.
13 years, I think now. Forever entrepreneurs, but yeah, we've been doing this Salesforce game for a long time. And yeah, we're excited to partner with Chris and his team on government.
And we're excited to partner with Xenai as well. So Icon are an integrated agency, so we specialize in website design and development, user experience. We are Drupal-based, but we also do behavior change and brand and PR and comms and crisis management, the whole gamut of communications. And I'm Chris. I've got a background in design and digital strategy. I'm one of the co-founders of Icon. We've been around for a couple of decades now. It's great to be here.
Great. And you actually do the PR for Slack, which is a Salesforce product.
We do, yes, or we did in the past.
Okay.
Yeah. We've got a lot of technology clients. Yeah, we have Meta as a client, but a big focus for our digital team is around user experience and digital transformation, a lot for the federal government, especially in the web space.
Great.
Amazing. And because of the amazing speakers we have today, we have a lot to unpack. But let's start with, why do you guys think it's important to talk about, citizen experience?
I think for a long time now, governments have been trying to improve the overall experience for citizens. There's been a lot of effort around making services more accessible for people with disabilities, for people who come from cold backgrounds. English is a second language. And from an experience design, it's critically important, because the more frictionless you can create a service, the easier it is for people to be able to access critical information about government services that they require. So a lot of effort goes into the design of these types of services, and there are government technologies such as GovCMS, which has been set up to enable more efficient and compliant websites, managed service websites. But there are still some areas that are lacking, and a big part of that is around personalisation, which is what we're really keen to talk about today.
Yeah, I agree. I think consumers are used to dealing with the Ubers of the world, and if I can't deal with my government, which I'm a customer of, in the same kind of way, then it leaves a bit of room for improvement. And I think I'm really excited about providing better services to the citizens of a country through technology. Not only for their experience, but also for cost as well. It's a lot more efficient to have a front end user experience that really helps them, rather than having to deal with a service desk or a human that's going to help them with their query.
Yeah, and you're right about that. Like, the Uber experience have really set the standards high, right? And as a citizen and as a consumer ourselves, like, we see what technology can do. So therefore, the government, there's just huge urgency for them to be able to manage that expectations and meet that expectations. But why is it hard for government?
Government are obviously sensitive around ensuring their services are accurate and compliant and legal. And so there's always concern around data and how data is, well, what sort of data is captured and how that data is used. So often when websites are being designed, we're looking at personas and we're doing user journeys, and we're trying to do a catch-all for as many of the types of users of government services that we can do. And while that's conducive to good usability, there's no personalization there. So I think the hesitation for government is really around privacy and compliance. And I think this is why Salesforce is a solution for customizing content for citizens is a really interesting conversation, because they are accredited and they handle data and security at a very high level.
Yeah, and I think Salesforce has a really strong partnership in the government space, both federal and state. So they've gone through the IRAP process, they've gone through all the security compliance processes. I think it's safer to actually go with a platform like Salesforce than to sometimes custom build it in-house, where maybe the processes aren't as modern as they could be in other tech organizations. I remember I signed up for MyGov, a mobile app, and within a few hours, I had an SMS, like a spam SMS, saying, "You've got a refund." And it's already like, oh, my trust is already very low, and I think it's really important that we can trust the government with our data.
Maybe, Chris, you can help us in terms of understanding, as much as you can, the breadth of the power of Drupal.
Yeah. So Drupal is based around an open source model. So what that means is, rather than a piece of proprietary software as a content management system that you pay a license for, it's fully open source. It's maintained by the community. And the community and Drupal.org takes it very, very seriously around how they develop and maintain Drupal from a security point of view and from a functionality point of view. It's classified, I would say, as an enterprise level open source CMS. So it's kind of the next step up from something like WordPress.
Yeah.
It's based on PHP though. And it's really popular within the education sector, not-for-profits, because there's no licensing involved, and in government as well. So as I was saying before, GovCMS is a fully managed version of Drupal that's compliant with government services. And then also the Victorian government and the New South Wales government have adopted Drupal as their standard. So through standardization, it makes it easier for government agencies to adopt and use the platform, knowing that it's fully supported, it's secure, it's adaptable. But it does have its limitations. Yeah. So within Drupal, there are modules that can help with types of personalization. And certainly a lot of agencies are working on solutions for better personalization. But they are limited when you compare them to something like Salesforce, which has obviously invested many hundreds of millions of dollars into a platform that doesn't just personalize, but can integrate communications across a whole range of platforms, whether that's web or SMS or email.
Yeah. And just in terms of the continuation of that, Robin, if you can just share how Salesforce can help in terms of bridging that gap in public sector.
Yeah, well, Salesforce is effectively a CRM, so it's where you would store your first-party data on the citizens. A lot of governments already have Salesforce, so they're already tracking their internal processes using it. And usually a first step is case management, so handling a citizen's process, like an application process that goes through a government service. So we've already got that data, we've already got the platform, we've already got the security around it. If we can plug that data into Drupal, personalize using that data, that makes the web experience very powerful. So for example, if I already know the gender of a person that's visiting a website, I can personalize the experience based on their gender or based on their location or their application status or anything I know about them. It also allows me to capture more information around their interests and preferences in a secure way so that I can then continue to personalize. And that leads into an AI conversation where you can actually leverage the power of AI much more effectively because you're informing it and training it with the citizens' data in a secure way.
Yeah. So we've established that citizens expect personalized, frictionless experience. We've established that Drupal is a very much secure platform for government to be able to host their website on. But it has a limitation as far as the personalized experiences. And I like what you said. Like what you said is like the gender, going through a website, for example, I'm not sure if I can use this, but Vic Roads, embarrassingly, I don't know if I should share this. I just got my L's.
Congratulations.
And that was painful.
Big moment.
It's a big moment, but it doesn't have that personalized experience, right? So you're saying to me, with the integration of both Salesforce and Drupal, it has the power to say, Pauline is a Filipina, a resident in Australia, she's female, and she's trying to get her L's and eventually her license.
That's right.
This is the power that we're trying to create.
Yeah. So if you go to Vic Roads again, if it was personalized using that data, you would see how to get your P plates, or maybe driving courses that will assist you, or maybe some female-oriented guidance around that. So it's really powerful, rather than just giving you the static experience that everyone gets, where it may just say apply for your L's, because you've already done that.
Yeah, and we can think of so many use cases. That is just one in VicRoads. Are you able to share more? That's what you've seen, Chris.
Sure. So I haven't seen much yet, again, because the boundaries
This is
are
new.
high, or the barriers are high, but there are solutions there. But I think another great example, and this is one that we spoke about at Drupal South recently, was if you take, for example, the Department of Defence's website, and if there's a young postgraduate woman who's interested in joining the Navy, she's going to the website, she's looking for information on how to sign up to become a member of the Navy. She's reading information on what it's like for a woman in the Navy. She's trying to find out if there are events in Melbourne. She's reading articles about Navy history. So with her permission, to say we would like to personalize elements of this, so we're going to collect some data, get her permission, it means the next time she visits the Defence website or the Navy website, she's going to see information that is actually directly relevant to what she's looked at in the past. So she might have a pop-up that is saying, here's a quick guide on how to sign up and enroll. She might see news articles that are specifically related to information that, or other news that she's looked at. So every time she comes back to the website, she will see more and more personalization around the things that she's interested in and the next steps that Defence would like to take in encouraging her to inform herself and come into their web estate and the department, with a potential role. So it's a far more personalized experience than just relying on the user to blindly navigate their way through and find information unaided.
And there are so many benefits to that because the information's all there, right? It just needs to be organized in a way that is accessible, easily accessible, and makes the citizen feel like, oh, there's a level of interest here in what I need, rather than have to sift through endlessly in information. And what happens is you call, right? And that on its own is not efficient for the resources and the funding for you to just be able to access simple information.
And it's an interesting point about all the information being there. It is, and I think a lot of big websites, a lot of government websites spend a lot of time re-architecting and auditing their content to make sure that it's relevant. And so these sorts of tools, I think, are really interesting for people that are in communications departments, that are trying to think about how can they make their content more relevant, more accessible. And while it's a little bit of extra work because you've just got to start to think about the personalized experience, the content is already there. So it's a matter of how do we get this particular piece of content in front of that person.
I think it's important to note as well, you mentioned before consent. Like consent's very important with data collection. While we can collect all of the data, you may not want to collect it if there's no consent. So I think asking consent and also allowing people to opt out of it is really important. It's a core part of what we do with marketing is making sure there's a really good opt-out process. And also data retention policy as well. I think we don't necessarily need to keep all of the data all of the time. We need to have a clear guidance around how long should I keep the data for, when is it necessary in order to personalize, because we're trying to be ethical here and personalize ethically. And it's about giving the citizen a better experience at the end of the day. It's not about collecting data to market to them.
Exactly. It's about what is the minimum amount of personal data that we can collect to enhance the service. And as you said, we're not trying to sell them an extra set of sneakers or an overseas flight. We're not trying to build a massive profile. Their data isn't being sold or aggregated in any form. It's very discreet and private and specific to a purpose.
Yeah, but that is sort of like the tension there, right? Because we know that the government holds so much of our information. And what's even more frustrating is that it's not getting used. Like, how many times have we called? I'm like, I've called about this so many times and I've told you the story so many times and I've shared this information. Don't you have it in your system, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How many times have we said this to not even, actually, to be fair, it's not just the public sector, it's also private sector, right? That's really where the frustrations are coming from in terms of bridging that gap. But I cannot stress enough this importance about trust. So how are you both so sure that, Drupal and Salesforce, there's no like gaps in terms of being able to securely not mine that data first and foremost, get that consent, not to make, because like that's what governments are afraid of. If they don't have to worry about that, then they'd probably be open and let's do this implementation, right? How can we be so sure?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think there's precedence already. Yeah. So as you pointed out, governments already collect data. Yeah. So they use it, whether it's the tax department or Vic Roads or whoever, the NDIS, they all have data on their customers and citizens. And rightly so, that data is very closely guarded and protected as it should be. What we're talking about here is continuing with that precedence that's been set, but actually using the data lightly, and with consent to enable a better experience. And I think, back to your very early point around we're already experiencing this level of customer service with corporates, I mean, if you're going shopping on Amazon or eBay, you're logging in, you're seeing products and services that are directly related to your history. It's useful. And I think people are used to the idea that data is being collected already. It's sometimes frustrating, when you've already bought something and you continue to see that ad on all of your feeds. So, I think with a Drupal and Salesforce solution, we're being far more targeted, more discreet, more private, but in the end, far more useful for a person. And there's a degree of expectation. Again, back to that initial point.
Absolutely.
I'm experiencing this in my corporate digital life. Why can't I have a government service that is far more targeted towards me?
The biggest single risk of data security in organizations, including governments, is people. So it's usually the access controls that people have. The people themselves are the ones that make mistakes, less so the technology. It used to be the most secure data infrastructure was having data servers sitting in a back room with a lock and key, but that's still fallible. People are still at risk of kind of opening that up. And then you have to wonder, do they have a armed guard on the door? Do they have two data centers? So there's a fallback mechanism. So all of these old ways of managing data wasn't actually that secure. Now we've got services like Amazon who they have local data centers, but they manage all of the security, all of the, if anything goes down, if a server goes down, they'll recover from that. And we call that a zero trust architecture, where we have all of the systems integrated and working autonomously. So there's no dependence on humans to manage things or change things or personalize manually. It's really up to the systems to work together securely. And as long as they have those controls, then it's actually a much safer environment than having a manual kind of old system where people have to work with data.
So apart from the fact that this is what we expect as citizens because of the technology that's available to us, because of private sector providing this type of experience already, it's also not efficient. It's also not the right thing to do anymore. It isn't advisable because it's even more risky from what you're saying, right? You've mentioned so many other barriers. So now we've established that this is better. What you're doing is wrong because it's a lot riskier than what you think that this implementation can provide. What are the other barriers? So if they say, okay, check, Drupal, Salesforce, good with data, check. What are the other barriers that government, face?
I think one of the biggest barriers, but it's also an opportunity, is around investments that have been made to date. So there is a movement towards DXP within government, so digital experience platforms within government. But a lot of investment has already happened into websites and infrastructure. And so the idea that, me as a department who over the past, few years has invested hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars into, a large web estate and ongoing licenses, the idea that I would rebuild that from scratch, I think is a big barrier. One of the benefits, I think, of Salesforce is you don't have to rebuild your underlying infrastructure. You don't have to rebuild your website if it's a Drupal-based. You can literally just use an API, feed Salesforce in and start exchanging data both ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
So while it comes at an additional expense, obviously, because Salesforce is a licensable product, the cost benefit and the return on investment is far greater because you're not having to build from scratch. You're integrating into existing systems.
That's right. And it's really as simple as an SDK. You're installing an SDK on the GovCMS Drupal site, which securely handles everything for you. And with Marketing Cloud personalization, you were just building content blocks and informing those content blocks with your first-party data. So a lot of the personalization engines of the past or current days of most CMSs, it really personalizes based on the data that they have access to, which is usually the browser data. So where the person is, which state they're in, and maybe gender. So there is an element of personalization most CMSs can handle. With Salesforce, we've got the additional first-party data that the government already has on their application process or, their personal details, their address. So we can further inform the personalization, and it's just handled so securely between the website and the Salesforce without having to do anything custom or manage anything too difficult or risky.
Okay. Well, let's get geekier. If we are not geeky enough. Pitch it to me. How does it all look like? So I'm from the government agency. Woohoo, I'm in charge. How does that look like? If I ask you both guys, you're in a presentation, how can I improve the citizen experience? Where do we start?
I think we start with existing information that we have. Yeah. So any government agency that has conducted a well-researched, well-informed program into understanding who their users are and what it is they have to serve, they have a lot of data and a lot of research there about the people. And if it's been done well, then that's been applied to the information architecture and the user journeys and the like. My pitch to government is that's all well and good, but it only gets you halfway there. And government services are always looking for efficiency. And if you're a large service that has an interface with citizens, you have forms and email addresses and call centers that are taking a lot of heat from people that can't find the information that they're after. My pitch here is that this is going to be a far more useful and efficient way for you to deliver more personalized services. It's going to lower reliance on having call centers and people answering emails. Still very important. People still need human interaction by choice, or when it's appropriate. But the idea of being able to automate and allow people to self-serve because the website's far easier to use than it was before, I think is a really, really interesting pitch.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're not telling people to move away from platforms they already invest in. They're probably already spending a lot of money. I assume in your example, you're already a Salesforce customer and a Drupal customer. So if you've already got those two, then how do we make them work really well together? And it's starting at the basics. Like a lot of government sites, they have a phone number listed for contact us or an email address. And instead of doing that, let's just put a form there with, some validation to make sure it's a human. That way you'll stop spam calling, and you'll also deflect a lot of calls to the contact center where they would have called, and every call that comes in has a very high cost to the government. That's taxpayer money answering those calls, where it could be a form that they submit, or it could be as simple as an FAQ article. And with Salesforce, for example, the FAQ articles, we can embed them onto the website, but they can be the same article that the contact center has access to, which can be the same article that an AI chatbot has access to. So it creates a single source of truth to the knowledge that's surfaced to customers to self-serve, but then it's also surfaced to agents as well as AI agents and everywhere in between. So it's those are basics. That's not even talking about personalization. That's just how do I get the website to be more modern and effective from a contact center perspective.
So what I'm hearing from both of you is that let's figure out what is the low-hanging fruit of what you're using right now, optimize it, find the quick wins, and then build on that. Yeah. And then I heard a lot of the benefits, the cost efficiency of that. What's next? Right? Okay, I like that. We've done that. We've done the easiest, quickest win for us. We've seen the fastest path to value. What is next for me?
I think the obvious one that is on everyone's minds at the moment is around AI, and around agentic AI especially. Again, because government is risk averse, there will be slow adoption. There's governments are slow to adopt AI and large language models into their own organisations, and again, rightly so. You don't want to be giving away personal or sensitive information, to an AI. We don't know where that data is going in some instances. So I think as the AI space matures, especially around agentic AIs and AI-driven chatbots, as governments become more, as they become, sorry, I've stumbled here.
That's okay.
Start again.
Pause. Yeah.
Yeah, as governments become more satisfied with AI products as being safe and reliable and less likely to go off the rails,
Yes.
they're going to be more comfortable with starting to slowly introduce these into either personalization on the fly or into things like, agentic-based chatbots. It'd be interesting for you to talk a bit about that and your experience with Salesforce.
Yeah. So Salesforce, they've released Agentforce. It was only late last year that it was really live in production. So we've seen the first round of customers go onto it. And yeah, as Chris mentioned, it's probably a little bit early for government to really get into it, but I think it's early days and the opportunity's there because Salesforce has all the guardrails. It has the data security. They've got a really good trust layer where I can automate, I can leverage the same integrations that I've already got, the same security layers to automate the processes that AI agents will need to run. So if I need to query an account balance or query, my case status, I can get that through the same process that I would do in talking to a customer service agent. So it's leveraging the same features, but it's just got the LLM model on top and it's got guardrails. So I can configure it to say, do not talk about this, never get political in the chat or anything that it shouldn't be talking about. I can set those guardrails in a very easy way. It's all configuration based. So there's not like a developer required to do that. So it's it's the right architecture and the right structure to support government use cases. I think what really comes into the play is the ethics around it, what happens if it starts giving incorrect advice, or what happens if citizens try to hack it with all sorts of weird questions and it gives out weird things that no tester had ever thought about testing. So I think we were talking about this at the conference is governments really need to lean into AI, but have a process of testing and QA around AI that's probably never been seen before in organizations, where they're just constantly trial and error, testing these AI platforms.
I don't know, Robin. I would like to disagree with you in terms and challenge what you said earlier that it's too early for government, right? Every time I, look at LinkedIn, I always see like there's madness now. There's DeepSeek, there's madness, and it seems like these the Chinese are really winning the tech race, right? And I feel like when I wake up tomorrow, they're gonna have, another development.
Yeah, that's right.
And it makes me think, like, shouldn't the government get ahead of that, right? I know it's very risky. We know government's risk averse. I know they have all the boundaries and the guardrails, and they need to be the most cautious, for the citizens' sake. But that's the very reason why they need to go dive in very deep. But what should they do, right? So we talk about the ethics. We talk about like how it's going to be very difficult for them. But there's no, they can't make excuses, right? They have to protect the citizens. But what is the safe thing for them to do from both of your, I guess,
so I think,
perspective?
All governments at the moment, local, international, are working on safe and responsible use of AI policies and guidelines, not only for bureaucrats and public servants, but also for technology companies and the general public. So it's a space that is moving quickly and maturing quickly.
Yes.
And certainly I know that the Australian government doing a lot of work on what those policies are and what kind of guidelines they can put out publicly to help organisations adopt and adapt to a rapidly changing world. So I think like anything, it's important that while you may not be producing public-facing AIs to start with. You have to at least be getting in, understanding the technology, experimenting with the technology, linking it into your services and testing it, because it's coming.
It's
and
here.
So it's here, it's coming for government. It's here for many other businesses. My encouragement would be, governments need to have departments, or committees within their organisations that are looking at this technology. They're trialing it, they're testing it, they're working in close conjunction with ethics committees and technology suppliers and prompt engineers and all of these things, to be able to ensure that in the next couple of years, when these things become commonplace, that they're not behind.
Yes, exactly.
And it's a good point. Like, you can do a lot with AI without surfacing it publicly and making it so risky. You can surface it to agents and have them be informed by AI recommendations and content generation. So email responses, things like that, where we used to have email templates for, they can just generate those kind of things and they're personalized. So a lot can be done under the control of a human where it's very safe. And I think there's just use cases in government where it's going to become easier to do, say your L plates. Like, that's probably a bit less risky than, say, dealing with the ATO.
Yes.
So it's like, why don't we release it early for those kind of departments and test and learn? But I think government needs to continuously invest in policy and making sure there's good AI literacy in organizations. No different to private organizations. Their boards need to be across what the risks and benefits are. I do ultimately think that governments need to stop being a cost center to the people. And how do they do that? It's actually through autonomous agents. So they can deliver services at much less cost than they used to, and maybe leverage AI to generate revenue in places that we couldn't generate it before.
So I'll follow your lead. What should I be doing now? I'm from, the government agency. I heard you talk about, like, writing the policies, writing the guard rails, doing small wins, like small implementations. Where do I start? Let's talk about Agentforce, for example. We've done our first implementation where we just did like FAQs, right? Is that something relevant that the government can do?
That's
and
very simple.
Talk me through that process.
Yeah, so that's a really simple use case. So I've got my knowledge articles already in my CRM, and I'm just giving the agent access to read those and summarize them. So you can set up very clear guardrails where they can't access their personal information, they can't access anything like that. They can't ask questions that are out of scope. All they can do is ask questions where you've got a knowledge article that you can surface. And all you're doing is just getting them to surface that in natural language, which is easy to understand. So it's not dissimilar to surfacing a link, which is what chatbots yesterday used to be able to do. This is more understanding the context of the question and then providing the best response for that question.
And let's talk about the power of that. Let's talk about the breadth of power. Give me a specific example in the government, right? Like, for example, someone like 1,000 agents. How does that look like? We've deployed 1,000 agents. How does that look like? And how does that benefit the citizens?
Well, I think accessibility is a really big way. So, for example, when we implemented this chatbot, in the middle of our UAT, our testing, the client was like, "Oh, can it speak Spanish?" And we're like, "Don't know."
Not yet. Maybe tomorrow when we wake up.
And so it hadn't been trained to answer in Spanish, but it answered the question. So we asked it in Spanish, a question, and it said back in Spanish, "Sorry, I can't help you with this question in Spanish," but it responded in Spanish to the question. So it can speak Spanish, and it does, if you allow it, it can talk in Spanish back to the customer. So accessibility, it just makes it so much different because you may have all sorts of impairments or different languages or different cultural biases, all dealing with these agents. And maybe a human might be inconsistent with how they respond. An agent could be trained to handle all of those scenarios.
And I think also, the idea that you have multiple agents that have different purposes. Yeah. So an agent that might dig into a database and retrieve information and then regurgitate that in a natural language way. And talk to a customer. But before that, you might have an agent that is specifically around fact checking. Yeah. So before that agent interfaces, it's going to check against the actual information to check that that's correct. Yeah. So, I think this is what we're going to see is an evolution of a space where there are checks and balances rather than just generative.
Yes.
Yeah. Which has its problems, where there are guardrails in place and there are checking agents that are looking at other agents' work to ensure that it is valid. So it's an interesting space. It's moving really quickly.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And the benefits, we go back to that. It's really like a better experience, efficiency in terms of the spend. What else do you see apart from those two things?
You mentioned accessibility before. That's a real passion point for the work we do at Icon. And I think it's really interesting when you can look at these technologies as aiding accessibility. Yeah, so not just making interfaces with communications more efficient and targeted, which is around accessibility. But it's also, if someone is vision impaired, the idea that you can have an AI that will not just as a screen reader read a website out to you, but you can actually talk to the website.
Yeah.
So it's an AI agent that represents a government. It has its guardrails. It's only ever going to talk to the content of that website, but that on your phone, you can literally ask it questions about the service, about the website. How do I do this? What's the application process? If I want to talk to someone, what do I do? What's the latest of this particular policy that I need to update, if I'm a provider for a particular government service. So the idea that you can have a natural language voice interface into a website, I think is really interesting.
It made it sound like inclusivity, like the inclusion makes it a lot easier, right? You remove the bias as well in all of that. In a world where, we could edge towards a world where it's really serving us as it should, rather than making it hard for us, right? Because so far that's how citizens are feeling when it comes to the government services.
Yeah, there's also, it removes the human judgment aspect of dealing with government. What if I've got a really personal issue that I need advice on from the government, but I'm afraid to talk to someone about it. And we've got all sorts of examples that we're like, we probably shouldn't talk about those, but I will. So like when we were thinking through this Navy example, and we had Jess, who was the applicant for the Navy, maybe she'd have a question around her period. What happens when you've got your period, in the Navy? Like how, and she probably doesn't want to ask the recruiting officer, who may be a male, around that. And she may fear judgment, and, where does she go for that information? So maybe she'd be more comfortable actually dealing with an AI agent that's not going to judge her, that's just going to source the information.
Exactly.
There, I said it.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. No, I think that's really important. And there was a really interesting study that I read a couple of days ago that was looking at the uptake rate of people that were participating in a survey. Yeah, and they were looking at the hang up rates for if it was a person phoning compared to if it was an AI.
That's so interesting.
And it was massively higher engagement when someone was talking to an AI.
Wow.
Yeah.
I honestly thought it would be the opposite.
When the AI announces itself saying, I'm an artificial intelligence and I'm here to help guide you through this survey. People, I think, well, first of all, they're curious. They're like, I'm talking to a robot. This is going to be interesting. But also maybe, the idea that maybe I can say things that I normally wouldn't say with a person that I'm feeling intimidated about.
It's really interesting as well, like from a UX perspective, because there's heuristics with dealing with AI chatbots that are becoming more relevant now. So response time is a really important thing. People notice if it's got a slow response time to a voice AI. And they feel like it's disjointed, it's not connected, but you have a much better experience if it's got a very fast response time. So there's all sorts of interesting things that we'll have to start considering from a UX perspective around how do you interact with AI.
Just as a side note, there was an interesting study where when an AI came back with a detailed response too quickly, it wasn't trusted. Because people are like, well, hang on a minute, that should have taken a long time to consider. Maybe this isn't real information. And so they were building pauses into how quickly to make it feel more natural.
Wow. We're living in a very interesting dynamic world.
That's right.
And when you wake up tomorrow, you just don't know what sort of developments, and we're all sort of adjusting to this change and adapting. I don't know, like, in terms of the art of the possible, like, can you just like paint that picture? Like, just let's blow my mind.
I'm going to come back to this voice one. It's something I'm really interested in. Yeah, I think websites are pretty much the same as they've been since the birth of the web. Yeah. We have navigation, we have banners, we have columns of information, and we have hypertext, and we click around. It's been like that forever. It's a form factor that was reached really early, like a form factor of a car was, or the form factor of your phone. A lot has happened in phones since, you know, the touchscreen iPhone. They're pretty much the same. It's just the speed and the technology and the camera. I feel like the web is on the precipice of a bigger change.
Yes.
Yeah.
About time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it's obviously going to be driven by AI. It's going to be driven by personalization. And I think we're going to start to see interfaces into services, whether they're private services or government services, that are more natural and less about looking on a screen and hunting and pecking for information using a mouse. Yeah, it's
Love
more around having a conversation with
I
a
love it.
service.
Yeah.
A virtualized government agency that you can talk to naturally, like you would a
Yes.
friend,
Yes.
on your phone while you're driving, rather than having to do it at the office or sit in front of an iPad or a screen at home.
There to serve you.
Yes,
Right?
that's
I love
right.
that. Oh, I want that.
I was thinking about a question we got yesterday at Drupal South, and one of the guys was saying, how does personalization work if, as a user, I always expect to find something in the same place in a website? If you're always personalizing it, I'm not going to know where to look. But
Right.
yeah,
Interesting
it's
thought.
a really interesting thought.
Yeah.
But then you match that with what you were just saying, Chris, and that you've got someone that you can just ask. So instead of going to the website and having to remember where I found something, you just ask a question. That's it. I'd like help with X, and it serves you what you need. So it's less about remembering where it is statically and having to learn where to find it, and more about dealing with a ubiquitous interface that is just helping you, and whether it's voice or text or whether it just intuitively knows. It could be anything.
Yeah, and we're seeing this, with the rapid uptake of tools like ChatGPT and other LLMs, where people just expect, I don't want to see a page of information. I just want to see a dialogue. Yeah, I want to see a
I want
window
it to be
where
interactive.
Yeah.
I want to have a
Yes.
conversation straight away. Yeah.
And taking it a step further, I think there's an agent-to-agent future.
Conversation.
So
Yes.
instead
My
of-
agent.
Yes,
Speak to your
Correct.
agent.
Yeah. So I want to apply for my LPLAT, sort it out, and then you've
Mm.
got a booking in
Yeah.
seconds. But you're not talking to the government. You're talking to your own ChatGPT or
Yes.
whatever service you use.
Yeah. I don't know. It's exciting and also frightening.
But it does mean that all of the necessary things need to be in place for that to happen. So I've got to be able to authenticate another agent on my behalf. So that agent has to have a process, and it's probably not going to be a person. It has to be technology, maybe something on the blockchain that authenticates me as a authorized representative of a human being.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be very secure around that. And then
Tokenized information, right?
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And behind the scenes, the government has to have a single view of me as well. So I think before all of this has to happen, we also need a single source of truth, like an actual database where there's one record and it knows about all the versions of you. Because government departments, they have a lot of databases, and they're often not connected.
No.
And right now it does require a person to swivel chair between systems and applications. So they've actually got to get all of that tuned up in order for this future agentic vision that we've got to realize.
And how do they sync it all up?
Salesforce. Yeah, well, and that's the future. And I see there's two paths with government. I've thought about this for quite a while. I think there's a future where the government can't move as quickly as the private sector. So they may struggle to provide these user interfaces that we expect in time for our demands. So it may be that governments provide an API framework and they allow the private sector to surface services to citizens. So they interact with very secure and safe APIs, and that's what the government provides. They're the infrastructure provider of the citizen. And then you've got this whole private economy of organizations that may be startups, but they're serving the end users with more advanced interfaces.
Yeah, it's the same way they democratize the use of LLM, right? You want
That's
the
right.
government to do the same thing.
That's right.
Sounds very impossible. It sounds like we're very far away from that just because of the security, right? But that's ideal, right?
Yeah. But I think this whole agentic AI, like the future of labor, of the workforce, is probably going to move things faster than the government would initially want to move them. Because there's going to be a lot of redundancy, I think governments have to shift into a UGI. I know we're getting a little bit outside the scope, but UBI, they're shifting more towards that. So the revenue models of governments need to shift as well. So instead of receiving tax from citizens, they need to start paying the citizens. So in order for that economy to happen, they need to leverage these technologies to gain revenue elsewhere.
I mean, we can already see what Elon is doing, right? He's really removing all of the inefficiencies.
That's
right. So those people need to be upskilled, right? What would have been more human to do is that those people were upskilled first and repurposed to different roles before they were sacked, essentially. And that's what the technology, the opportunity provide for us, right? That's really the utopia. If we were to just be so optimistic, that could be the utopia where citizens are being given by the government some rebates, like huge rebates from their tax payments, or maybe reduction in taxes, right? Because it's so efficient in the way that we're doing things. Give it to me like I'm a 5-year-old in terms of the steps, right? We're speaking in front of all the government agencies in the world because we're amazing that way. Give me the steps, like this is what you're going to do, step 1, step 2, step 3. Let's start with you, Chris.
I think the first step is just a conversation. Yeah. So we don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
And it's just a matter of being curious and saying, can we have a conversation? Yeah. This is the information that I have, the tech stack, the content, and the problems. Yeah.
Yes.
Can we have a talk at more detail or depth about how Drupal and Salesforce could be integrated to help me as an organization, but more specifically and most importantly for the people that we're here to serve. So everything starts with a conversation.
Right. So just have an audit, right? Like just have a very honest view of where you're at. What's the current state, right?
That's right.
This is what we have. This is what we need to do. This is what we want to get to, right? And have those early conversations and just lean in, right? Just like be very curious and learn as much as you can. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
You, Robin?
Yeah, I think literacy is very important. Literacy around data security, around AI, around ethics. You know, these topics aren't part of IT at the moment, well, aside from security. And so I think it's actually just the same answer as a conversation. Like we just need to talk about it.
Okay, we've talked about it, right? They said, okay, we're
Lots
having
of
a
talking.
conversation, lots of talking.
Yeah.
What's next after that?
Yeah, well, I think leadership needs to get behind it. I think, love him or hate him, Trump is going to lead the US government through an AI revolution. And easy or hard, good or bad, I don't care, but it's going to happen sooner or later. And I think their motivation is to reduce cost out of government. I think our leadership in Australia needs to take the same angle of leading an AI revolution. Because if they're afraid to, if they're sitting on the fence a bit, it's not really going to help the government. So I think there needs to be bold leadership going into AI and into the future of technology.
Maybe in a more considered way than it is what is happening in the States with less disruption. But yeah, absolutely. Technology is changing quickly.
Yes.
Governments need to adapt. Yeah.
Yes.
Around the expectations of citizens. And I think, these sorts of tools are going to be really interesting to see how they roll out.
Yeah, I think the government needs to be tech-driven, but human-centered.
That's very good.
Thank you.
New slogan.
And it's a fine balance. And we all need to sort of have that compassion and understanding that we're all figuring things out as we go. And it's a very dynamic environment and it's constantly changing. So those two advice and have the conversation with the experts. That's why we're doing this. And just be unafraid to be curious, to ask all the questions. There are no stupid questions, to be honest, at this point, because no one knows everything, because there's so many things to learn. I honestly think that if I can just make a public announcement to the Australian government, they should be leading the AI academics, right? We should all have like a free education in terms of how it's changing our lives, it's changing the way we work, how the future could look like, so that we're going in it with open eyes. And I love that Salesforce is actually providing free courses around this, and they're investing so much money in it.
Yeah, I think like there's a long way to go for digitization of government. I see Victor Dominello in New South Wales. He's constantly posting on LinkedIn around the immigration cards as you come through the airport. It's like we still have to fill out these manual bits of paper, and it's like, why are we doing that? Where is that going? What's the cost to the consumer of having to do that? So there's a lot of work to be done in just using the current technology that we can already use. There's no ethical issue with just digitizing those processes. So I think the government needs to really invest in the basics first, get their house in order in terms of their own digital processes, and then they can build on top of them with AI. But they can't leap straight into AI without doing those things first.
Yeah. And what are those basic things? How does that practically look like? So is it like, let's have a meeting with the IT team. Let's have an audit of our current architecture. Let's figure out all the inefficiencies of each of those and what are the pain points of those systems. Where maybe even mapping the citizen journey, like the user experience. Are these the practical things that you're talking about?
Yeah, and I'm sure they're doing those things already. I'm sure there's a million programs in government where they're trying to digitize their current processes. It's just about the speed at which they're doing it. And, you know, I think government departments probably operate a bit slower than private departments. It just is what it is. But the faster they can accelerate that innovation is the faster they will get to these AI use cases.
Yeah, and I think, you know, key here is not you're not throwing everything out and restarting. Yeah,
Yes, like we don't want that.
No, you can start with a small part of an existing website. Yeah, and look at how you can automate or customize some functionality or particular types of content or messaging flow. Yeah, and give it a test and see what the impact is.
Yes.
Yeah, from the call center to feedback that you're getting. You know, it could be a couple of small tweaks, dipping the toe in the water.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you can see the benefits and then you can go, right, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And that's why we're here this morning, right? That's why we have this partnership. We want to be able to really guide and help as much public sector governments as possible in terms of navigating this really complex ecosystem. You know, starting from their website, you know, with Drupal, with our partnership with you, with your expertise, and you know, our Salesforce partnership when it comes to citizen experience.
I think if I think about the pace of change, like in a commercial space, you'd always answer that with lean agile or, you know, that product mindset. And I think if governments adopted that framework rather than, I think a lot of the projects they do are probably quite waterfall and big, and they start with a big RFP and they end up in years of development before any value is delivered to the citizen. I think if there was a continuous improvement approach to governments and how they transform their technology, because they've already made these big decisions, like which CRM platform, Salesforce, they've already got that. They've already got Drupal. So how do they iterate those and get the most value to the citizens as quickly as possible? And that's really agile. Love it or hate it. It's like the mindset is the right approach.
It's so important. And I love working with government, and we've been doing it for many decades, but quite often projects have a start and finish date. So the project is done, the budget is finished, you've ticked it off, and it just goes into maintenance. As opposed to that agile iterative, right?
That's right.
You know, let's every month or every quarter or, you know, at a bare minimum once a year, do a deep dive. Let's look at how successful this deployment has been. Can we do some more user interviews, an additional room for enhancing, you know, the usability of a particular function or pathway? Continuous improvement is how you better services over the long term.
And what's the what's the measure of prioritization? So do I prioritize over votes, or do I prioritize over citizen value? And if I look at every user story in a backlog, so I've got a long backlog, how do I shift those up and down? Is it really a political thing, or is it like, oh, this one is going to improve the lives of citizens?
I think that the biggest measure, and it's counterintuitive because in commercial space and on social platforms, you want continual engagement. You want people to do the death scroll and be with you forever. Yeah.
Yes.
With government, it's the opposite. Like as a person using a government website or service, I want to be in and out as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Yeah. So governments should be looking at, can we reduce the amount of time people spend on our website?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which feels counterintuitive, but it's really important.
That's right.
Yeah. Guys, final thoughts for our last few minutes? Maybe final thoughts from you, Chris?
I think this is a fascinating space, and it's a problem that a lot of digital agencies are trying to solve. Some of these tools exist within Drupal. They do an okay job. There's certainly some great agencies that are working on content customization in GovCMS and Drupal. But I think what we're lacking is that incredibly sophisticated and deep technological layer that can be integrated through something like Salesforce.
And I think on the other side, Salesforce, while it has some web front-end capability, it doesn't have the power and the scale and the depth of adoption that Drupal has, especially in government. So it's just a perfect partnership there for these two technologies to work well together, I think.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope that we're able to create a lot of value. Guys, as long as we're tech-driven and human-centered, I think governments won't go wrong.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.